Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we got it. Welcome back to On the Fringe. And to prove it to you guys, I just worked out in a gym at my hotel that looks like it is straight out of Karkil, Pakistan. And if you don't know where Karkil, Pakistan is, well, it's pretty far on the fringe. You can type it into Google or Wikipedia and you might learn something. It's a very, very, I guess, far off kind of place. And it's a very interesting place, too. And to kind of prove it, they have these really old, straight out of probably the mid 90s carpets that they have on the ground. And they're covered in sweat stains, which makes it sound like it's a very, very nice gym with some broken equipment. And it's perfect for anybody that wants to be a power lifter. But the heaviest dumbbell that they have is about 5 kilograms. So good luck training.
Oh, I mean, we might just be talking about gym equipment all day today. I have a gym on my campus that they have one of those, like, there's the belt that moves that I think it's supposed to shape and tone. And it looks like it's out of the 50s, and it's still in the gym. We have one stationary bicycle that's had just a massive oil stain coming from it for like 2 months now. There's just a puddle of oil in the middle of the floor, and you just walk around it. I will say that it's much better for weights. We don't have the same issue that you do, but it's, you walk in, and I can't say it's the most aesthetically appealing place on the planet.
No, but at least it sounds like it's shapely, though. I mean, if it's got that shapely belt, I mean, pretty much if you go to a gym in Korea, that's pretty much a mandatory piece of equipment.
Oh, they still
and
have
if you're
that?
above the age of 40, oh yeah, if you're above the age of 40, you pretty much have to stand and wait for everybody else to use that thing before you can leave. I think it's mandatory.
I literally had no idea about that. I do know that it seems to be around here. I know that if you went to the States, you'd probably have to go to a museum to find one. I'd never really seen one before I moved out here.
Yeah, I haven't either.
No, I mean, it's just, kind of mysterious. Anyway, speaking of aesthetically pleasing environments.
Nice transition.
We're talking about a very special place today. Thank you, Dave. A very special place today on the island of Borneo, smack dab in the middle of the wonderful country, the Republic of Indonesia. Dave and I both served there in the Peace Corps. Dave, in fact, there right now.
Where we're talking about, but in Indonesia.
In Indonesia, in the wonderful Republic of Indonesia. And Nusantara is special because it is going to be something, but it's not quite that thing yet. And Dave, could you just tell us very briefly, why is Nusantara important right now?
Okay, so Indonesia has slated to build a new capital over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, and they've put about $33 billion into it so far. So Indonesia has a 2045 national vision for the country to fully develop, and building a new capital is a huge part of this. You've been to Indonesia and you've been to Jakarta. You know Jakarta is very, very hot. It's very crowded, and the city's actually sinking. So they're trying to alleviate some of this congestion by moving the capital to Borneo, and they're trying to spread some of the population off of Java to other parts of Indonesia. And we could do a whole nother episode about transmigrasi and some of these other domestic, policies that the Indonesian government has been trying to implement for the last 70 years. But I mean, we're going to stick today with just talking about Nusantara. And
because I mean, that's literally what you just brought up. That's like a whole college course. That's really in depth. We're just talking about the new capital, or rather the capital in waiting, because as of right now, there are no government functions that have been transferred over. It's still essentially a clearing and construction site in the middle of Kalimantan, or Indonesian Borneo. And, just to go off of something you said. First of all, I think Jakarta, the last I checked, it's over 20 million people. The entire metro area, I think, is approaching 30. It's really stupidly massive. The population outstripped the infrastructure probably about 70 years ago. It is literally sinking. And when we say sinking, we're not talking like New York City sinking. We're talking like Miami / New Orleans sinking. Things are not good. Most of it is really already under sea level. And originally, because it was founded by the Dutch as a city called Batavia, when the Dutch built Batavia, they had canals and they had dikes and they had ways of basically making sure the city wasn't drowned. But those have not been maintained again for about 70 years. And they would have been irrelevant anyways, because they were just designed for a population of maybe 80 to 150,000 people, nowhere near anything they have today. So it's it's just not good. Um, it's basically large parts of it are quickly becoming or about to become uninhabitable. There are way too many people living there. These people are going to have to be, unlike the sort of conversation around transmigrasi, this is not something that, might happen over a long period of time. This is something that's really going to happen pretty quickly in the
Mm-hmm.
next 15 to 20 years. And to the credit of the outgoing administration under Jokowi, they understood, or Jokowi at least understood, this is an eminent issue. You really need, I mean, you're not going to be able to get people into parliament. You're not going to be able to get people into the Supreme Court. These buildings are going to be underwater. So you have to transfer these functions away from Jakarta. Also, the other complaint, which you also touched on, is everything in Indonesia focuses around Java, and people don't like that. People like the idea of a little more equitable spread of things, I guess is the
Mm-hmm.
best way of saying it.
Yep. Well, that's a very important part of Indonesian culture as well.
Hmm.
Is within Indonesia, they have a concept of sama-sama, and it's thank you, and it also means that we're the same. So they're trying to create, I guess, an equal playing field for all Indonesians, regardless of where they are. So if they're in Sumatra or they're in Papua, they all have the same rules and they all have the same playing field. And if you have everything concentrated in Java and the economy for the most part is concentrated in Java, at least most of the infrastructure is, it's going to be harder to actually develop the rest of Indonesia. So if you build a new capital in Kalimantan on Borneo, then that does spread some of the wealth and it spreads some of the government services and it spreads, I guess, some of the liability as well for the government to where now they're making it easier for Indonesians in other part of the country to have access to potentially higher education that didn't exist 15 to 20 years ago there. And other types of energy and food and virtually everything else that they need to actually become prosperous.
Yeah. And, I mean, you touched on a lot of very important things there, but it's important from a basic, I think, ideological standpoint where even if it isn't true, because again, so much is so concentrated, and not just in Jakarta, but in Java, it's also the idea of, look, we're trying. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
worth noting in all of this, Jokowi's Javanese. He's from Java.
He's
But
from Solo, so it's right in the center of central Java.
it's basically as Javanese as you can possibly get without being from Yogyakarta, and that's kind of another deal. So, he's he's very Javanese and he's very of that world, and he's aware that this is something that plays very well kind of across classes. The idea of equality in Indonesia is something that people are very receptive to. largely because there have been structural and historical reasons why most people don't have access to it. So this is at least some kind of lip service to the idea of equality across the islands, across the ethnic groups, across the different classes. This is the little dot in the center of the country.
And it's more than just throwing them a bone too, where it's like, okay, we're going to develop Nusantara into their plan is to develop it into a world-class city, unlike any other city in the world, where they're trying to build a huge city kind of in the middle of a jungle that's going to be sustainable and largely green, and it's going to be, from what it looks like, absolutely beautiful.
Now
So whether
this
this
is the
whether this turns
trillion
into it
dollar
is
question. This is
yeah,
the
whether
trillion
it
dollar
turns into
question.
this is for the future to see and for everything to play out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is a grand vision for Nusantara and for Indonesia. And I would even say that Nusantara is kind of the center point. The figure of Indonesia's 2045 national vision kind of does rest on Nusantara developing and kind of Nusantara kind of growing out of the jungle, kind of like Indonesia's expecting to do over the next 20 to 25 years.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate read, and I think it is very much the centerpiece of that strategic vision. And it's a strategic vision that's very much the brainchild, I guess, of Jokowi and his administration. So I guess the other thing to talk about is as he hands or as he has handed power over
Mm-hmm.
to Prabowo Subianto, who's the new president of Indonesia, uh,
Yeah.
is Nusantara still coasting along? Is that going to still be supported under the new administration? Um, I guess the first thing to start off with is there's going to be definitely some continuity. So many of the people in the current administration were in the Joko Widodo administration. Prabowo was in the Joko Widodo administration
Yep. Ministry of Defense.
as the
And
Minister of
two,
Defense.
just to dial it back for a sec, sorry to interrupt. Indonesia had a
No,
presidential election earlier this year. And this week, Prabowo was inaugurated as president of Indonesia. So this is a brand new thing over the last 6 days. This has kind of happened. And he's started to build his cabinet and they're starting to move forward with his policy over the next 5 years.
yeah. So this is, and as this handover has happened very quietly, the previous administration admitted that actually, while construction in Nusantara was speeding ahead, they were not transferring any government facilities over there. So the concern for some people is, oh, look at this, another boondoggle in the jungle.
Mm-hmm. And two, just money. I mean, they've spent billions of dollars already trying to develop this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is in Prabowo's hands right now. And I was looking in Antara, so an Indonesian news agency, threw it in with item number 5 on his agenda. So it's part of their sustainable economic development main point. And Prabowo was trying to push discipline and trying to get rid of corruption.
Hmm.
So you tie all of this together and you tie in Nusantara with it. And I mean, if they can do this right, they can get rid of corruption that was a big problem in Indonesia for a very long time. Then, I mean, it could be the start of a brand new start of Indonesia under a new president.
And I mean, without getting into it, there are a lot of reasons why people are a little skeptical about that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we'll see. I mean, the proof is always in the pudding, right?
Yeah.
If you can make it work, no one's going to argue. But I think, unfortunately, one of the characteristics, and we can both attest to this. I mean, this is politics everywhere, but definitely politics in Indonesia, and definitely electoral politics in Indonesia is uh, the moon tends to get promised, and the reality is usually not anywhere up to par. You talk about empty promises, and oh boy, there are a lot of those going around.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately. And they're right now they're trying to fix the economy and they're trying to improve the education system and they're trying to digitize and they have so many things going on in the
Mm,
country right now. And I think it's a matter of, okay, what are they going to prioritize first? What's going to be their first or second issue that they tackle?
yeah.
One of the big ones is sustainability for food, and then you have energy sustainability as well, and trying to improve the local domestic economy. I mean, those are probably three of the biggest issues in Indonesia right now,
Mm,
currently. And I mean, you look at this and go, okay, Nusantara is just a huge, huge kettle of fish where there are so many moving parts going on with it.
oh my
And
God, yeah.
I think once it starts to get traction, I mean, it'll probably work. But if you're building a huge capital city in the jungle, you only have a limited time before Mother Nature comes in and goes, "Oh, well, I'm going to start clawing back on your progress." So, in some ways, the clock is ticking where they need to keep this project going at the same time. Otherwise, they're going to lose time. And they already lost a little bit of time due to COVID a couple of years ago. So, it's going to be a challenge for them, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, right there, you talked about it. They're just major logistical issues to building a city in the middle of the jungle. It's not easy. Uh, you really need to know what the hell you're doing, and you are inevitably going to have major, maybe even disastrous setbacks, and you really need to be prepared for that. Um, Particularly, and there were environmental concerns raised at the time because you are building in the middle of the jungle. This was not previously developed territory. This is very much not necessarily middle of nowhere, but it was not exactly a urban center. Let me put it
Mm-hmm.
like that. So, there are going to be inevitable logistical problems. And I guess the concern people have is, are the logistical issues when they crop up going to contribute to a loss of political momentum in Jakarta?
Mm-hmm.
As Jakarta is more focused on uh, maintaining their kind of strategic neutrality, on defense spending, on fixing the economy, which is not in a good place right now for a variety of reasons. As they're focused on these more immediate priorities, uh, don't you think they're going to lose focus?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a big, big challenge for them, I think, moving forward. And
Yeah.
it's definitely possible, but it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of willpower to get this done. And I think, we'll know probably by the end of Prabowo's first term whether this project really is moving forward or whether it's going to, they'll still build, Nusantara out there, but
Mm.
it's not going to be what it was envisioned to be, or it will be what it is envisioned to be later on.
Yeah. And, I think that's sort of where we're at, where, you kind of just have to cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it exists for a reason. And I think it's a pretty good reason, all in all. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty tall order, and it comes at a time of some instability and I think some uncertainty in Indonesia about what does the future look like exactly, where are we going, and I
Mm-hmm.
think you're right that as we go through the first Prabowo term, and I say the first because I feel like inevitably he's going to run for re-election unless something happens to him. Um, as we go through the first Prabowo term, it's going to be really interesting. Does Indonesia look forward? Does it look back? Does it lean towards one side in this multipolar world, or does it sort of try to maintain some kind of neutrality? And I think in the middle of all of these countervailing pressures, you have the sort of future of the Nusantara project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a ton of moving parts. I mean, especially if you've spent time over in Asia. There's a lot of stuff going on in this part of the world right now. And you have no idea what's going to happen in the next probably 6 months to a year to 2 years. It really is very, very hard to speculate in terms of, what's actually going to happen. Even if you try to, build a confidence interval or something like that, you still have absolutely no idea.
Anyways, I think on that note, we're gonna cut it off for the week.
Yep, we're gonna call it. So we're just doing a shorter episode for today, and hopefully we'll be back with a couple of longer ones in the next few weeks. So last week I was pretty much under the weather. There was no way I could have done anything, and it's been kind of a challenge as well getting decent internet out here. But we'll be making more podcasts as we can, and we appreciate you guys joining in and listening. Thank you very much for your comments and for sharing our podcast. And we look forward to informing you guys, entertaining you guys more in the future. Take it easy on. Yay! Happy dance.